Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works offers a chilling examination of the mechanisms through which fascist ideologies infiltrate and destabilize societies. By dissecting historical and contemporary examples, Stanley reveals how fascism manipulates cultural narratives, political systems, and human psychology to consolidate power. This summary delves into each chapter of Stanley's work, preserving the depth and breadth of his analysis while presenting it in a cohesive narrative form. Central to fascist ideology is the construction of a mythic past, an idealized, often fabricated history that serves as a rallying cry for nationalistic revival. Stanley argues that fascists exploit nostalgia, crafting a narrative of lost glory to foster unity and legitimize their agenda. This myth is not a benign homage to tradition, but a calculated tool to erase historical complexities, glorify dominance, and justify present-day authoritarianism. The creation of the myth, fascist leaders meticulously curate a distorted version of history, emphasizing purity, heroism, and moral superiority while silencing narratives of oppression or inequality. For instance, Nazi Germany propagated the myth of ancient Aryan supremacy, framing the Third Reich as a revival of Germanic greatness. Similarly, Mussolini invoked Rome's imperial legacy to fuel Italian nationalism. These narratives are rooted in selective memory, where inconvenient truths, such as systemic violence or exploitation, are omitted or rewritten. Function and mobilization. The mythic past fosters a collective identity, offering followers a sense of belonging and purpose. By framing societal challenges as symptoms of decline from a golden age, fascists position themselves as saviors. This narrative imbues their actions with moral urgency, casting the restoration of the past as a historical inevitability. The emotional resonance of nostalgia overrides critical scrutiny, enabling followers to embrace radical solutions. Dangers and contemporary parallels. The manipulation of history distorts reality, fostering an us versus them mentality. Stanley highlights American exceptionalism as a modern example, where a sanitized view of U.S. history obscures slavery, indigenous genocide, and systemic racism. Such myths perpetuate division, scapegoating marginalized groups for societal ills and justifying exclusionary policies. Propaganda is the lifeblood of fascism, weaponizing emotion to reshape reality. Stanley emphasizes that fascist propaganda is not merely misinformation, but a systematic reframing of truth to consolidate power. It simplifies complex issues into binaries of good versus evil, leveraging fear and anger to mobilize masses. Mechanics of manipulation. Fascist propaganda relies on repetition, emotional triggers, and scapegoating. The Nazis' pervasive use of media, from Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will to Joseph Goebbels' orchestrated campaigns, demonstrates how relentless messaging normalizes extremist ideologies. By dehumanizing Jews as existential threats, the Nazis justified genocide under the guise of national survival. Modern applications. Donald Trump's portrayal of immigrants as invaders mirrors this tactic, stoking xenophobia to galvanize support. Propaganda's insidious power lies in its ability to create a post-truth society where objective facts are subordinate to belief. This erodes democratic discourse, as dissent is stifled by accusations of disloyalty or elitism. Anti-intellectualism. Fascism thrives on anti-intellectualism, discrediting expertise to elevate populist demagoguery. Stanley outlines how fascists frame intellectuals as out-of-touch elites, dismissing empirical evidence in favor of emotionally charged rhetoric. Historical precedents. The Nazi regime purged academia of degenerate thinkers, replacing scholarship with racist pseudoscience. Intellectuals were branded as traitors, their critiques dismissed as threats to national purity. This anti-rational stance facilitated atrocities by silencing opposition. Contemporary manifestations. Modern anti-intellectualism manifests in climate change denial and attacks on cultural Marxism. By vilifying experts, fascists undermine accountability, enabling policies rooted in prejudice rather than evidence. Intellectual resistance, Stanley argues, is vital to exposing fascist falsehoods and preserving democratic discourse. Chapter 4, The Politics of Loss. Fascism exploits societal anxieties precipitated by economic or cultural upheaval. The politics of loss preys on groups fearing diminished status, offering scapegoats and promises of restoration. Nostalgia and fear, post-Italy and Germany, exemplify how fascists capitalize on national humiliation, promising a return to imperial glory. Similarly, modern white nationalism exploits fears of demographic change, framing multiculturalism as an existential threat. Emotional manipulation. Fascist leaders eschew nuanced solutions, instead channeling anger toward marginalized communities. The allure of restoring a mythic past obscures the impossibility of such goals, legitimizing authoritarian measures as necessary for survival. Chapter 5, Stereotypes. Stereotypes are pivotal in dehumanizing others, simplifying complex identities into monolithic threats. Stanley illustrates how fascists use stereotypes to justify exclusion and violence. Historical and modern examples. Nazi caricatures of Jews as greedy conspirators laid the groundwork for the Holocaust. Today, migrants and Muslims are similarly scapegoated in Western democracies, depicted as criminals or cultural invaders. These stereotypes, amplified by media, foster division and normalize oppression. Psychological impact. Stereotypes engender superiority among dominant groups and alienation among targets, perpetuating cycles of discrimination. Fascists exploit this dynamic to consolidate power, presenting themselves as protectors of the pure majority. Chapter 6, Mythic Past Revisited, reiterating the Mythic Past's centrality, Stanley explores its role in national identity. Fascists invoke symbols and rituals, real or invented, to legitimize their vision, such as Trump's Make America Great Again, or Orban's glorification of Hungary's Christian heritage. Symbolism in education. Control over historical narratives through education and media ensures ideological conformity. By glorifying militarism and racial homogeneity, fascists equate their agenda with national destiny, marginalizing dissenting perspectives. Chapter 7, Propaganda. Expanding on propaganda's role, Stanley examines its evolution in digital eras. Social media's echo chambers amplify fascist rhetoric, enabling rapid dissemination of conspiracy theories and hate speech. Modern autocrats like Trump exploit these platforms to bypass traditional media, directly manipulating public sentiment. Chapter 8, Political Correctness. Stanley critiques the fascist co-optation of political correctness as a smokescreen to attack inclusivity. By framing social justice efforts as censorship, fascists position themselves as defenders of free speech while suppressing marginalized voices. Case study, Trump's rhetoric. Trump's dismissal of PC culture galvanized supporters feeling alienated by progressive reforms, illustrating how fascists weaponize backlash to maintain hierarchies. Chapter 9. Fascists invoke a homogeneous people's will to legitimize authoritarianism, dismissing pluralism as divisive. Stanley highlights how referendums like Brexit exploit populist narratives, masking minority rule as majority mandate. Erosion of institutions. By vilifying courts and media as elitist, fascists dismantle checks on power, centralizing authority under the guise of democratic legitimacy. Chapter 10. The Rejection of Democracy. Fascism inherently opposes democratic principles, favoring strongman rule. Stanley traces this from Hitler's dismantling of Weimar Germany to Orban's erosion of Hungarian democracy. Fascists equate dissent with treason, criminalizing opposition and enshrining authoritarianism. Chapter 11. The dangers of the other. Constructing a dehumanized other is foundational to fascist unity. Historical scapegoating of Jews finds parallels in modern anti-immigrant policies, where refugees are depicted as existential threats, justifying draconian measures. Chapter 12. The Control of Language. Fascists manipulate language to distort reality, employing euphemisms like national security to sanitize oppression. Control over media ensures narrative dominance, stifling dissent through censorship and propaganda. Chapter 13. The Cult of Personality. Fascist leaders cultivate godlike status, merging their identity with the nation. Charisma and propaganda obscure flaws, rendering criticism unpatriotic. Figures like Mussolini and Trump exemplify this cult, leveraging personal mythology to justify autocracy. Stanley concludes with an urgent call to vigilance. Fascism's resurgence underscores the fragility of democracy. Defending democratic institutions, promoting critical education, and fostering solidarity are essential to countering authoritarianism. While the threat is grave, collective action can preserve freedoms, ensuring that history's darkest chapters remain unrepeated. Final reflections. How Fascism Works is both a scholarly treatise and a rallying cry. By elucidating fascism's mechanisms, Stanley empowers readers to recognize and resist its insidious spread, affirming that democracy's survival hinges on informed, engaged citizenship. As Jason Stanley warns, fascism thrives by twisting the past, dividing societies, and silencing dissent. Understanding these tactics is the first step in resisting them. Democracy depends on informed, engaged citizens, and that starts with recognizing how fascism works. By understanding how fascism works and the subtle ways in which it infiltrates society, we can better recognize its threat and work to preserve our democratic values. Stay informed, stay engaged, and protect the freedoms we sometimes take for granted.